Welcome to Mindful School Marketing, your go-to podcast for personal and professional growth.
We're school marketers, business owners, and moms passionate about connecting other school professionals with tools and strategies for success.
We love solving problems, exploring new ideas, and thinking outside the box. Let's transform your school and life starting right now. Transform your school's admissions and marketing with Inquiry Tracker, the ultimate solution for managing inquiries seamlessly. Discover how you can make your admissions process more efficient and effective with this leading solution.
Welcome to Mindful School Marketing. I'm Tara Clays.
And I'm Aubrey Bursch. Today, we're joined by Bob Thomas. Bob has gained a reputation for his down-to-earth, authentic, and inspiring approach, a strategic relationship builder, classroom teacher, athletic coach, entrepreneur, and school leader. As an avid sports person, Bob has coached high school and college varsity teams. When he was hired to coach and start the first men's golf program at Rosemont College, he became only the second African-American in the NCAA's history to coach a golf program that was not at historically Black college or university. Bob is the head of school at the Walden School in Media, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia. Welcome, Bob. We're really excited you're here today.
Well, thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to speak to you and tell you my story in a lot of ways. So thank you again for having me.
Yeah, thank you. We're excited and honored really to have you here to talk to us about your story and about independent school leadership and your history in that realm. We are going to be talking about diversity in this episode, and I think that's a really important topic that, as we talked about in preparation for this episode, it's talked about a lot without seeing maybe as much change as we would hope to see over all these years. But in preparation for this, we're so grateful that you shared a letter with us that you wrote in 2016. It was a tribute to your father and the power of words. We were so inspired by that story and really wanted to have you share that and talk about the challenges that your dad faced as an African-American man, years ago, and how he went on to achieve remarkable success. Would you summarize the story for us?
Sure. My dad passed away in 2014. And I remember as a young child, he told me this story about his teenage years. He grew up in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And at age 17, he had gotten the job as in a bathhouse. And at the time, the Atlantic City beaches were segregated, and he was working in the bathhouse in the white-only part of the beach. And that meant that he was cleaning out the bathing suits of the white patrons who would come in there. So one day he's there, and he's sitting on the bench in the bathhouse, and he's reading has a copy of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, and he's reading it, and a white patron, a woman, female, comes in, and she looks down at him and basically says, "That's an interesting book that you're reading. Do you understand what you're reading?" And he said, "Yes, absolutely. I understand what I'm reading." And I remember him telling me that he was a little, miffed at how she kind of asked the question because of the time period and being in a white only area. So the woman goes and showers, leaves her bathing suit. My dad washes it out, folds it up, and everything else, and he sits back down and continues reading Leaves of Grass. And the white female comes out, and she sees him reading it again, and she says, kind of looks at him a little bit, grabs her bathing suit and starts to walk out, and then turns to him and says, "Do you really understand what you're reading?" And he says, "Yes, absolutely." And long story short, these 6 words changed my dad's life. She says, "Then what are you doing here?" And she said it in a way that was not, antagonistic or demeaning. And my dad said those 6 words basically changed the trajectory of his life. What am I doing here? And from there, he just, shot forward. He ended up enlisting in the Army in World War II. He was part of the 92nd Infantry Division under General Patton, the colored division to see action in World War II. He fought in the Italian campaign. And from there, he graduated from the University of Pennsylvania on the GI Bill, and then just had all these different types of jobs and careers where it was important for him to really have the strength of character, the strength and confidence that he needed to move through, because he was either the first, the only, or one of a few African Americans in a lot of these positions. He ended up being the corporate vice president of a New York Stock Exchange company, the first African American to do that in that business, the food business. And from there, I mean, he just taught me a lot of different things, and it was able to give me that kind of confidence, knowing that I was going into an arena in the independent school arena at the time where there were very few African American people of color, especially men, and in that area. So what I learned from him and using those words that really springboarded him into a really powerful position and a powerful career and a great career. I really needed to really write that story so people understood exactly where I was coming from.
I so appreciate you sharing that story with us. It was an amazing story. And I mean, to hear all the things your dad has done and overcome, and it sounds like passed on to you, especially when he shares and talks about that story and says, you know, that question that was asked of him, like, what are you doing here? As you're reflecting on your own leadership journey, how have moments like these, or perhaps your father's kind of experience, as well as what he kind of left to you, the lessons learned, how has that shaped your perspective on the role of African American leaders in independent schools? And how do you think schools can better support diverse leaders in their mission?
Yeah, it was very helpful in watching my dad go through his career and tell me that story and the things he had to face, which were a lot worse than what I've faced in my career, although I've faced a lot of the adversity and racism. What he went through was even more intense. But it did help me a lot, because I remember my first teaching experience was at a archdiocesan school in Philadelphia. And when you talk about the impact it have, or the impact you have as a person of color in schools, I'll never forget walking into that archdiocesan school, was in North Philadelphia, walking into the cafeteria as a new teacher, and it was a mostly Black school. Literally, I never forget this, walking in down the steps and presenting myself so that to the everyone that was downstairs, all the kids were downstairs, everyone just turned and looked at me as, oh my gosh, is this guy actually a teacher here? Is he janitor? Whatever it was, it just, that impact, that simple process of just being there in that space, I could see changed a lot of how people were thinking, how the kids were thinking. And it was one of the most amazing experiences I ever had in teaching. And having my father giving me that confidence helped me get through that, because that kind of, to me, that kind of pressure, in a lot of ways, that you are really a role model for every single kid in this building, was a lot. And it took a lot to really understand that, moving through my career in the independent school arena. So it's important that schools look at this. And as we said before we came on, when I look at the percentage of folks of color, African Americans in leadership positions, administrative positions, from back in 2018 and now in 2024, whatever, hasn't really changed a lot, although there have been a lot of hires and heads of school. We still have a lot of work to do. One of the things that I thought was difficult for me through my career was that, me being one of the first in a lot of these arenas and a lot of these schools, because there weren't a lot of people before me in these positions, I didn't have that mentorship or that peer group to talk to when things got difficult. Where now you do have heads of color group or emissions groups, all these different groups where you can go and talk, which is very important, to have this mentoring and peer opportunities for folks who are getting into the arena. That I didn't have. So a lot of that, some of the difficulties that I faced, I had to face alone, or talk to other people who were not in the industry and try to figure out how to move through it. So the more schools can do to foment peer groups and mentoring and all folks of color, regardless of what background, to get together and talk about these issues because they're still prevalent today. Even though it's 2024, there's still a lot of things we have to do better. The climate right now is very scary in terms of what we're going to see moving forward from a diversity, from schools, from books, all these different things that are going on. So, hopefully the clock isn't going backwards, but it feels somewhat like it is in some cases. So the more schools, especially independent schools, that they can do to talk about, peaceful living, inclusion, all these things that are important to the environment of school, I think is really important for schools to really take a leadership role in.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the role that you played in forging the path by yourself was something that your dad did as well, right? So I think
Yeah,
he was a role model
yeah.
for you, even though it wasn't in schools, just in terms of standing out and not having some peers in the same boat as you
Mhm.
is
Yeah,
is a lonely place to be. So,
yeah.
you
I
got
think
that from your dad.
Yeah, I did. And I think, we had spoken about earlier about the idea of servant leadership. I think
Yep.
that's what he really did. Even though, as I said, Robert Greenleaf didn't write about servant leadership in the 1970s. My dad was doing a lot before that. That's how he kind of moved through his life in terms of building others up. He had that confidence, but he always was a good listener. He really did a lot of conceptualization. He looked into the future and said, okay, what can I do to get here? And what path can I take in order to get there? And all those things about being aware of his surroundings, being aware of himself, having that self-awareness and self-confidence, all these things that servant leaders do, I think is really important. And again, I didn't read Greenleaf's book until 1995. And, when I read it, I was like, wow, there's a lot of things my dad did, he taught me that I'm doing that really fit into this servant leadership role. And after reading it, I'm like, wow, there's a lot more that I could do to help move forward the idea of diversity and inclusion in a lot of the schools that I ended up going to. And again, I was either, like my dad, the first African American in the school's history, or the first administrator of color in the school's history. So moving through that and trying to manage that situation was always challenging. But if you have that confidence, you have that awareness, you have that sense of servant leader where you're looking to help others, and in helping others, you're helping yourself. That was very meaningful in terms of how I felt that it impacted my life and how I impacted others.
Yeah. Do you think that that servant leadership is driving any changes in terms of bringing diversity into independent school leadership? Do you think servant leadership plays a role there?
It does. I mean, I think servant leadership informs equity, diversity, and inclusion in a lot of ways, and how it the characteristics of a servant leader. And basically, you need to be able to, as a servant leader, create the environment that encourages awareness for others, and being able to, at the same time, reflect on your own behaviors as you move through, and the biases that you might have, or the other things that need to be addressed as well. I think one of the biggest things in that is listening. I think that's a something that's lost right now in a lot of our landscape. Being able to just listen and being able to receive someone's words and feelings in a way that you're not already developing a response in your head, but you're trying to just focus on that person in that moment, and meet them where they are, and rather than trying to always think about how you can help solve the problem, just the person probably just needs to be listened to in a lot of ways. I think that is important to do as well, especially when you talk about being in the position of leadership as a person of color, whether in a classroom or an administrative position, being able to listen to your colleagues, being listen to the students and their stories that they are moving through in their lives. So the servant leader really encourage that kind of diversity of thought and inclusion, but you really do have to make sure that you are in a position where you are self-confident, self-aware, and able to listen at a level that is that the person feels accepted and valued in that particular moment.
Thank you, Bob, for sharing about that. I think that's something that we can all learn from. And, I know certainly on my book read list is to learn more about servant leadership because it can have a tremendous impact on people. And it sounds like your father and you have been able to share those skill sets with others and have gotten so much out of them, both personally and professionally. I'm wondering, Bob, before we recorded, we talked a little bit about storytelling, and
Mhm.
your story right now that we're sharing right now reminds us of how stories and history can shape our emotional connection to the present. So I'm curious, like, how can schools incorporate the rich and diverse personal histories of their leaders, perhaps their students, their faculty, people at the schools to foster more an inclusive and understanding school culture?
Yeah, to me, I think we spoke about earlier about the listening to the stories and people's and how people have moved through their lives is really important. And we can always talk about the the aspects of what diversity means, and I think the definitions of diversity, inclusion, and things along those lines. But when I hear person's stories, when I hear someone who talks about in a faculty meeting microaggressions and how it has affected them, and what it's meant to them. I was at a school where we had two administrators of well, a teacher of color and the one who was a person who was working in the front office. These two women, and after a year and a half, faculty members still were calling them by the wrong name, and they didn't realize it, that's a little bit of a microaggression, or talking about the person's, well, that's an interesting hairdo or something like, and just all these little things that happen. But in the past, maybe people didn't present those or want to tell the story or whatever. Now I think it's time where you need to be able to hear that. You have to hear that. All these different things. I mean, it happened to me, when I was at a certain school, they called me by the other black male's name rather than after being there a year or 2 years. And you wonder, what are you doing? Where are you? Where's your thought process? Do you understand what's going on? And these little microaggressions, whether they're you know targeted to a person of color, or targeted to a gender, or whatever the case might be, you got to think about it. You got to pause and understand, and you got to listen to what's going on. And when people hear these stories, I think it's more impactful than just defining what diversity is or inclusion is. Listen to the stories. Listen to how people feel. Listen to how they move through their life and the things that they have to deal with on a daily basis or monthly basis or whatever the case might be. So when I look at and want to be involved in diversity training or diversity discussions or DEIB discussions, I want to hear these stories. People need to hear the stories of what has impacted that individual on an almost granular level, and then move through them from there. That awareness, again, awareness of yourself and awareness of the other person. And again, that's one of the characteristics of servant leadership, being aware. So the more stories we can hear, the more stories we can share, I think will have more of an impact. And again, it's taking these actions and being able to be comfortable with these actions. And we need to do a better job of doing that, and understanding where people are coming from. And I think this generation is needs to really put that at the forefront, because it's going to be challenged over the next, I don't know, whatever years or whatever. It's going to be challenged in a huge way. So I think independent schools, because they are independent, are going to have a huge task and responsibility with the students that come into our schools, in order to help them manage this situation. Because in the public sector, it's going to be hard for those teachers and those students to get that kind of awareness if things work out the way they're going to work out. Nobody knows what's going to happen, but independent schools are going to be on the front lines, and that's what I think. So the more we can listen, the more we can tell the stories, the more we can talk about the training and understanding what is happening out there and what our children are going to be facing and what our adults are going to be facing. We have a task and a responsibility as an independent school arena.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you know, the I've been studying biases and implicit biases versus explicit biases, and how those, you know, lead to microaggressions and those types of things. And so it is sharing those stories, I think, does help us realize where some of this comes from in terms of the biases that we have, and addressing them and recognizing them. So I think that's a really important part of the picture as well, and makes it harder to overcome, because biases are, you know, they're deep down inside of us. But for
Mhm.
schools who are striving to improve diversity, you know, as you mentioned at the beginning, it's been a very slow process, and we talk about it a lot, and I think, unfortunately, it's probably going to be talked about less in the near future. But how do we move beyond the good intentions to real systemic change? That's a huge question. I know that we can't necessarily address this on a
Yeah.
podcast, but you know, it is really easy to just talk about this stuff and say the same things over and over again, as you mentioned to Aubrey and I before we recorded. You know,
Mhm.
talking is easy. Walking the talk is not so easy. I don't know if
No,
you have
it's not, and it's
there. Yeah.
not, and it is frustrating. I'm no spring chicken, been around the block a few times. But when you look at when I started and where we are now, have things improved? Yeah, they have. They definitely have improved, but there's still those areas that I think about. I'm like, wow, we really haven't gotten better, or we really haven't improved in it in a lot of areas. And there is a lot of talk, and there's no. It has to be intentional. You have to be able to have those hard talks and be uncomfortable. I mean, this is nothing new. I mean, we've heard this all the time. You have to have those uncomfortable talks. You have to be in the space where you are aware of, you know what, yeah, that was a messed up thing that I said. I really didn't think about what I was saying, and I'm glad you brought that to my attention. I've had a couple of instances here at school where other teachers heard something from another teacher, and that teacher went up to the teacher in a professional and a very uh, nice way, said, can you tell me why you said that, and what, and that really is a lot more impactful than letting it go and not doing anything about it. I forget the gentleman where I heard this from. He said, if you make an observation, then you have an obligation to
Mm.
do
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, it was an African American writer. I think he was at the state association's dinner somewhere. I wish I could remember his name. I'm sorry, but that really kind of impacted me. If you make an observation, you have an obligation. If you see something, you got to say something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just going to keep going. And I know this is old stuff. This is stuff that has been hashed around for years. I'm not saying anything new, but you have to be intentional and be okay stepping outside your comfort zone in order to be able to move forward with a lot of different things. And it is uncomfortable
Yeah.
when it's brought to face with you. I mean, there's things that I've caught myself saying that, like, oh, geez, I can't believe I just said that, because it's an old adage or an old phrase. And I'm like, that's not right, Bob. Okay, and
Right.
you have to
Yeah.
think
And
about that.
I think responding to those things without being defensive, responding to them humbly, and not saying like,
Mm,
you're telling me I'm a terrible person. You're pointing out a mistake I made,
right.
you know, and addressing it without being defensive is
Hmm.
hard for a lot of people to do. But I believe
Yeah.
that that's a way to make great progress, is for people to not to not be defensive when they make a mistake, and just,
Yeah.
do
It's
something.
not about shaming people.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
it's about educating you and getting you to understand what's going on. I don't want to shame you. We all know the history. We all know this. We all know that. It's there. I mean, it's out there, but it's people's responsibility to educate themselves, not just within their own environment, but outside. Read a book, do a webcast, read something online, do your homework, and really understand what's going on out there. And it really it takes personal fortitude to really want to understand what's going on. You have a responsibility when you step into that classroom with those students, or I step into the building as an administrator. I have a responsibility to take care of everyone in that building in the best way I can. I always say we have 130 kids in our school. That means we have 130 different personalities and 130 different ways of learning. And it's incumbent upon us as an institution to meet those kids where they are, and to understand their story and to understand their parents' story, and figure out what is the best possible means of creating an environment for them to be safe, welcome, and then successful. I need I need kids and people who are emotionally and mentally safe in their environment before we can start with the academics and all that stuff. If they're not, don't feel safe, and they don't feel, we have to know that. What is it? Is it something that's happening in the classroom? Is something that's happening in the school? Whatever the case might be. And when you're in leadership positions like me as a head of school or other leaders, you're going to get raked across the coals at some point. People are going to bring it up to you, whether they're folks of color or white folks, whatever, they're going to bring it up. And you have to be okay and say, you know what, here's what we're actually doing about that. But you know what, you're right. We aren't doing a good job with that. And I have to be able to understand that, get to the leadership team and say, we have to talk about this. This is a situation that has been brought up by several people. We're not doing a good job. Let's see what we can do in order to help this along. And that transparency and not being afraid to ask those questions, to talk to your constituency, to survey your constituency, and be okay with the negative feedback and the positive feedback. That is key. It's not personal all the time. It's institutional. You can change the institutional in a lot of different ways. So it's a lot. It's ongoing, and we do our best to really work hard to make our institutions or independent school institutions the best possible, safe, welcoming place that we can. And I always said when I was in the admissions and enrollment management field, I always say, in the Philadelphia area, we have a plethora of independent schools, probably more than any area in the nation, actually. I said, when you go to these schools, you're probably not going to get a bad experience academically. It just doesn't happen. I don't think so. Where you can go wrong is the community. Where is the community? Ask the hard questions when you're in front of that admissions person. Where are you on the diversity scale? What do you do in this? What are you doing in this situation? Does everyone feel welcome? Don't be afraid to ask those questions, because you'll know as soon as you hit the door if that school is the right place for you. But don't, every school has a different feel, a different personality. They're on a different scale in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. They're all different. So ask where they are. Don't be afraid to put them, if they start swarming in their seats. You're like, you got an idea of where they might be. It's uncomfortable for them. So you have to kind of take that into consideration when you're thinking about, do you want your greatest gift, your children, to be in that environment? And that's really important.
That's amazing, Bob. I'm so glad you mentioned that. There's so many times, and I think that question is coming up more and more in admissions. I work with a lot of small schools, and when we're talking about what sort of questions are parents asking, that's one of them. And I think the transparency, what you said about transparency, is so key. If we're not transparent about where we are as school leaders, and we're, very honest with our answers, believe me, online is a whole plethora of parents who will who will come out of the woodwork on review sites or other places, and they're going to share their experience. And if it's not in alignment with what you're doing as a school, parents will take note. Prospective parents will take note. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate you bringing that up. And the survey piece about listening to your community and being able to sit with the, not to jump to conclusions, not to take anything personally, but be able to sit with the results of your survey or what people have brought forward and kind of understand it, and as a group, like really discuss the challenging things that are going on and what you've heard in a mindful manner, I think is something that all schools need to work towards if they're not already doing already, because that's how you create that space that you were talking about for the students, which is what I hope all our schools are striving to do. So
Yeah,
thank you.
and then you mentioned the mindful piece, which is really important, to be mindful of it, to sit back and think and take that pause. And when mindfulness wasn't a big term when when me growing up, but I remember when I played sports, I used mindfulness in terms of when I played baseball, or I'm out playing golf. I think about it, what's going on. I'm mindful. I get in the zone, or whatever they used to call it, getting in the zone back then. But you have to be mindful of what's going on and think about it. My dad said, if there's an issue going on, the first place you look is in the mirror. That's the first place you look. What part did you play in this situation? And then talk about your behaviors and things like it. Could you have done a better job? Maybe it's 80-20 them, 80-20 you. But understand that if you're in this situation, you had a part to play in it somehow. And how, when I look at that and I do that, sometimes it comes out like, you know what, I didn't play a major part. It happened over there, more over here. But how can I manage that? How can I change that situation if it's the other person? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. I've been in situations where had to leave with school, or whatever, and it just didn't work. But I always think about, well, what hand did I have in this situation? Could I have done something better? Or did I do the best job I can and it just didn't work out? And can I speak to this person or this group and see if we can change the path that we're on the environment that we're in? But it's understanding to be able to sit back and think and have that ability to be in a mindset that is, okay, let me really think about what happened. And even if you have to write it down or whatever, or speak it, and whatever the case might be, I think that's an important thing to do. I think the knee jerkiness, or if you're in a conversation, you're not listening, then you're not being mindful of that person. Okay, if you're listening and you're already made a decision on what you want to say back before if you listen to what's going on, it's not gonna work. So that's a hard thing. I'm still working on that area. My wife is a family therapist, so you can imagine the questions I get all the time, every day. Well, what do you think about that? Oh, how about this? I'm like, so I've learned a lot from my wife, because I sit outside sometimes. I sit outside her door and I listen to the questions she asks her clients. And I'm like, wow, that's an interesting question, and I've used it sometimes, and it does change the dynamic of that environment that you're talking to that individual. I'm like, thanks, honey. I really appreciate listening to you and you giving me this. It's taken a long time, but it's interesting that I've had that opportunity between my dad and my wife to have all this kind of stuff come to me, and understanding how to kind of question yourself and listen. And because what she does in terms of how she listens is incredible. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it with the couples. I'll be telling them, what are you talking about? Take care of your wife, whatever. But she does it. She just is very calm, and so I've learned a lot of ways to inquire in order to get either kids or adults to open up and really be comfortable around me. And again, that's awareness that you have in that situation. So you're building that trust that people will then be open and transparent with you as well.
Bob, that was incredible. As the Mindful School Marketing Podcast, I feel like you really hit the nail on mindful right there. Like with the questions we ask of ourselves and of others. I think that was just very powerful. Thank you, Bob.
Well,
Now I'm
you're
going to
welcome.
shift us to another part, which is one of my favorite parts of the segment, where we ask you rapid fire questions. Are you ready, Bob, for the
Uh-oh.
rapid fire?
I think so.
All right, here I'm going to
What's
kick us off
happening?
with question number one. If you could put one book as mandatory reading in the high school curriculum, what would it be?
Oh my goodness, yes, I believe. I don't know why I like this book, but I love it. A Separate Piece. I love that book. I love the symbolism in it. I used to teach it in my 8th grade English literature classes, and I've always enjoyed that book, A Separate Piece. And I know some schools do it, some schools are doing more contemporary things, but I think that was one of my favorite books. I would have that in my curriculum.
Great book. Thank you. Next question. What app could you not live without?
Grammarly.
Hmm.
I use that all the time. I've been using it for years, and it really has helped my writing and my tense and all these different things. Sometimes I agree with it, sometimes I don't, but I use it for pretty much everything. That's a really good app.
It's my son's favorite app as well. So like,
I
look
love
what
Grammarly.
Grammarly is saying.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing. What are you reading right now?
I'm actually reading, I have it right here. My CFO gave me, it's called The Teammates. And it's a portrait of a friendship. And he and I'm a big baseball fan. And this is a book about the Boston Red Sox and four teammates. And I remember Ted Williams. Let me see who else is in there. Johnny Pesky, Ted Williams, Dom DiMaggio, and Bobby Doerr. And it's not only about their relationship during their time with the Red Sox, but after they retired and that friendship that they formed after they retired. I just started the other day and I'm already loving it because I'm a Phillies fan first, but I'm a big Red Sox fan as well. So I'm looking forward to reading this book, but it's a portrait of a friendship and what they did outside of baseball. I'm really interested to see how that pans out.
Thank you so much. Our last question is, what is one great piece of advice? You've given us so much, but what is one great piece of advice you'd like to leave us with?
Oh, I, I I think maybe just be aware. Be aware of yourself, be aware of your environment and others, and you know, be that servant leader. Really be that servant leader, serve others, and it will definitely help you with your confidence in how you move through your life. It has helped me. It really does. I mean, take the opportunity to read Robert Greenleaf's, The Servant as Leader, and I think it's a great read. And there's also one called The Institution as Leader too. So yeah, just be aware. I think it's going to be very, very important moving through the next years. This has been fun.
Yes.
I like
Yes.
it.
Thank you,
All
Bob.
of that. Yes. Thank you. I'm going to put the as leader in our Goodreads list as well. We have a Goodreads list from all of the amazing books that our guests recommend. And that
Mhm.
is one I'm going to also add because it sounds really like it's really impacted the way that you approach leadership. Bob, it's been so great to have you here, especially at this time in our country, and we're just very grateful. So thanks for sharing your story, your dad's story, and sharing your experiences and ideas with us today. Where can people find you online?
Well, you can look me up on LinkedIn, of course.
Okie doke.
Bob Thomas, or at the waldenschool.org. I'm there as well. B Thomas at the waldenschool.org if they would like to, contact me, and if they want to, I'll share the story with them as well. As I said, I have these books in my head. I'm trying to figure out how to write them, but Aubrey, please share that story with whoever you like. I really, I wrote it for others to really be inspired by my dad.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank
This
you.
has been
Yes.
welcome.
Thinking of you. Have a good rest of this calendar year, and best wishes and hopes for the next. This episode is brought to you by Enquiry Tracker. We believe that every inquiry is an opportunity, and with Enquiry Tracker, you can unlock the full potential of your school's enrollment journey.
Say goodbye to missed opportunities and hello to a streamlined admissions process that prioritizes efficiency and effectiveness. Discover the leading solution for school admissions and marketing. Visit inquirytracker.net to book a personalized demo today. That's inquiry with an E, tracker.net.
Thanks for joining us on the Mindful School Marketing Podcast.
We'd love it if you pop into iTunes and leave a review, 5-star preferred. Let us know how you like the show. It helps us improve what we're doing and helps others find us too.